bet you thought that you'd only see millennials up on this stage. Well, I'm here to prove you different. If someone like me that can fully understand the ecosystem and frothiness of esports, you all will be able to as well. It can be difficult though. If you're not a gamer, esports and the marketplace that we're in today and the frothiness in the marketplace can be really difficult to understand and to where to place your brands and how to engage your brands in esports. So hopefully today I'll help you through the journey, the same journey that I made. I come from traditional TV and traditional media, so it's a similar journey that a lot of us will make to ensure that when you do enter esports with your brands, it's authentic and it's real and it's something that the community embraces. Let's get started. We don't have much time. It's probably important for you just to understand where I sit in the ecosystem or where ESL sits. ESL is the largest esports company in the world. That's a non-publisher, an independent company. We produce over 20,000 hours of live esports in 6 studios around the world. We have 12 offices. We have 550 people, truly a global company that really mirrors what esports is. Esports, as we'll go through, is truly a global sport. And that's one of the nuances that I think has to be dealt with when you're looking at brands and looking at the opportunities, both in terms of a global nature as well as when we start regionalizing what's going on. Different games are important in different regions. One of the perhaps more important things about ESL, not only do we have 15, 20 of the largest arena events in the world, and we own and operate some of the largest online leagues, both amateur and professional, but the company was created 15 years ago. So when esports or competitive gaming was probably not even in its infancy, it's probably in the womb. And it was created and founded by gamers for gamers. And that's a pretty important nuance for not only ESL, but for esports and competitive gaming that you'll hear. Christina talked about it and Michael talked about it. The authenticity and the credibility that needs to occur when you're bringing brands into the sport. And it's that authenticity that the community will embrace if it's done correctly. So before getting into detail, let's talk about esports, because there's always a lot of hesitance to even talk about esports as a sport. And so I think that's sort of a key thing through this journey of understanding and, frankly, buying off and believing what esports is all about. As you see here, ESPN came out this year, or last year in 2016, saying, for the first time in generations, we're witnessing the birth of a new sport. Gaming is what every traditional sports league is desperate to become. It's young, it's global, it's digital, and it's increasingly diverse. It's all of those things. People wonder, is golf a sport? Is WWE a sport? How can esports be a sport when you're just watching people play games? Let me roll a video, and hopefully this will help you through some of that.
I'm a huge soccer fan, but this was way bigger than this was Real Madrid winning their 10th Champions League. This is their 10th Champions League.
This is the 10th game I ever watched.
This was like 4 hours. This was like 4 hours. Emotionally,
the audio is bad.
It's like Moses.
You guys hear that? Okay.
Is expected. Katowice was like career use. Skyrocketed. When I did the Tiger move, at that time I didn't think. Thanks to this reward, but after everything I brought, I realized that I made something. That is gonna be there forever.
nip are patient.
This is a-
They lie in wait.
I can't hear it here. You guys hear what's going on?
They waited practically a year for this moment.
I really do remember. I really do remember.
Let's kill the video.
Am I back?
Well, there's a few more videos. We'll see what happens. So after that, you probably really don't get it. Hopefully by the next video, maybe. What that video was making the analogy is that at the basic level and the characteristics of esports, there is a connection with traditional sports. It's the same passion, it's the same skill. When you reach the levels in esports, that the same levels that a NBA player reaches, it takes that commitment and that skill level of any other traditional sport. And you get the passion and everything beyond it. So let's try to move through this a little bit and give you a little bit more of a foundation on esports before getting into how we've worked with some brands, because I think it's important to build that foundation. Esports is a little bit more like track and field than it is the NFL. Where there's the javelin, there's the 440, there's the hurdles, different disciplines, and they don't necessarily cross over. Same thing goes for esports, where these are all different disciplines, and not only do the fans not necessarily cross over, but the players don't necessarily cross over. But what's interesting here is not only these games, but the numbers behind them. So League of Legends, everyone's probably heard about, 75 million active players. Dota holds an event every year where it's crowd-funded for the prize money through in-game purchases. And those in-game purchases represent a small amount, but last year there was an $18.5 million purse for this event based upon the engagement of the community. Counter-Strike, one of the most popular esports today, over 500,000 concurrent players. Heroes of the Storm, 75 million monthly active players. Hearthstone is a digital card game, kind of like poker, 10 million plus accounts. So you can see Halo, 60 million copies sold. So what's important here is a couple things. One, different disciplines. So depending upon what your brand is and who is attracted to your brand and your demographic, you may choose a different type of discipline to put your brand in front of. And it's really important to take a look at that, because not all esports are the same. And within that target, there's a huge engaged market. But again, Hearthstone, very different from a Counter-Strike or League of Legends. Millennials, we've talked about millennials, and this is really this hard group of people to reach in now what is traditional media in general, not even just traditional sports. ESL audience is 81% between the ages of 18 and 34. 75% are male, and that's that's a number across esports, not just ESL. ESL is pretty similar to that. The perception of gamers and esports enthusiasts being in their mom's basement by themselves playing games should not be the perception any longer. It's very social. These enthusiasts have a great deal of disposable income, on average $76,000 household income. So dispel that perception if that's in your mind. It's not true. It's really social. They're on talking to their friends. They're trash talking with their friends online while playing. And they actually come to all of our events to meet the people that they've been communicating and competing with. It's a really interesting dynamic. A few more stats. You guys will be statted out, I'm sure, today, but just a little bit to set the table. 76% of enthusiasts say that watching and engaging in gaming and esports takes hours away from their consumption of traditional sports and traditional media. So this is where they're spending most of their time. More than double of the online population have subscriptions to Spotify. So again, disposable income and engaged in other activities as well. Interesting thing, we like to look at this market. We had one of our events, we created a anthem for one of our events, and we threw it out there just to see how well this composed song did. Within a week, it became a top 10 downloaded song on Spotify in 8 countries around the world, 2.5 million downloads. The NFL network picked it up because of how fast it was trending for their season last year. So again, really important when you're looking at brands and how you can engage, because these players and enthusiasts have other interests rather than just games as well. Content. This just shows a consumption, from 3 years ago, video plays went up for almost 5 times, from 120 million to 560 million. Unique viewers, 32 million to 100 million, 3 times. Hours watched, 44 million to 166 million. Again, this is just portions of our content online. You may see a lot of this type of analogy. This one's interesting. They say by 2018, there'll be more enthusiasts for esports than there will be for the NFL fan base. And again, key metric here, this is global, not just mostly in the United States like NFL, but it just shows the scale of what's going on. Now, I have another video in back of here that was supposed to get you excited, but let's see if that happens.
It's more than esports. It's not just a competition. It's the competition.
This right now in the Spodek Arena is a moment that every player waits for the entire season long.
So many game 5, so many losses, but not today. They're back, they're big, and they're Swedish.
Welcome to ESL 1 Grand Prix. You couldn't ask for a better venue and better teams to face up in the finals.
Hello everyone and welcome to the ESL National Championships. We've got some amazing action coming your way today.
What a great time to be here in London.
The crowd is already packed, ready for some fantastic Counter-Strike.
I didn't believe it when they said it was sold out, and I walked into the stadium and it was just ridiculous.
This tournament has been nothing short of amazing. So many storylines and so much to talk about. It is going to be unreal.
Live from the Barclays Centre in downtown Brooklyn.
Please, what do you call this? They're all been abused. No!
My first time at a big arena event, I was on the floor, and I literally just closed my eyes, and you'd think you were at an NBA game or an NHL game with the crowd going nuts, and I didn't necessarily know what was going on the screen, but that's beside the point. Again, let's get into brands, because maybe you still, with that, not getting it. But I think once we start dealing with the brands, let's bring it a little bit closer to home. So I'm sure everyone's read in the last, we'll call it 6 months, professional sports leagues getting involved. There was a slide in the very beginning that Chris put up with the NBA getting involved. So the 76ers have a team. Paris Saint-Germain has a team. Manchester City has esports teams. Some of the brands that have jumped into esports: Coke, Red Bull, Intel, MasterCard, Geico. So some major brands, and we'll get into some of these in a minute. A lot of sports celebrities and celebrities in general, Rick Fox and Shaq, Magic Johnson, buying or investing in teams because they understand the dynamics of a sport. They understand the passion that goes into it. They understand what goes into a team. These teams have nutritionists. They have sports psychologists. They have fitness people. Again, anything to perform at those highest levels. This is no different than an NBA team, and these guys understand that. And that just, again, sort of opens the door for different types of engagements for brands. As Christina said with Turner, this content is now finding its way on more than just Twitch and YouTube. That's where a lot of the core consumption is being made. But as storytelling gets better, we've had content on ESPN, on Fox, on the BBC, Canal+. So you'll start seeing much more of a traditional media acceptance of esports as well. Yeah, looks like we're going to
into the professional division. You become a professional player.
We're going to talk about Mountain Dew, but I'll let the video roll.
The Mountain Dew League, is definitely the biggest thing that's giving us exposure.
Hey, what's up, guys? I'm going to show you some clutching tips here. Patience is super important when clutching. Pretty simple tip, guys.
GG versus LDLC, victors of the Mountain Dew League Global Challenge. It's Rogue.
Battled it out in the end in double OT. How does it feel, brother?
It feels good.
All right, so now I'll set up the video. Mountain Dew dipped their toe in the water of esports a couple years ago. And in learning about their experience, what they decided, again, to be as authentic as they can within the space, they wanted to be involved in much more of a grassroots basis. Rather than just putting up their brand in a pro event or one of our arena events and tell people, drink Mountain Dew, they really wanted to get engaged on a grassroots level. So we have the largest amateur Counter-Strike league and community, which we renamed Mountain Dew League. And what that enabled Mountain Dew to do is really get into the Counter-Strike community in ways and engagements that you saw in that video. Interestingly enough, in doing this, we worked closely with not only their marketing executives, but also their media buying agency. And so when you're looking at esports, because it has such scale with social media and on the digital distribution, media agencies or the media side of your business can be really helpful, partly in just helping to determine some of the metrics. In this case, we had started off with a metric of wanting 10 million impressions for Dew. We blew it out of the water and had 60 million impressions. We focused really heavily on associating Dew, since this was an amateur league, in helping people get better to improve their performance. So we had a lot of tips. Those tips had almost 1 million views or 660 million views. So they took a very different approach. The other aspect with Mountain Dew was they wanted the brand to be aspirational in some way. So we were able to take the winners of this amateur league and have them have an opening or a pathway to our pro league. So the winner of this amateur league got an automatic entry into our Counter-Strike Pro League, which is the largest league in the world. So that gave the brand sort of an interesting way to associate themselves with, again, the authenticity and a pathway and a great storytelling of how these amateurs were able to go pro. Next. Oh, sorry. Quickly, because I think we're running out of time. Intel. Intel Extreme Masters is the longest running sponsorship within Intel, corporate-wide, number one. Number two, it also is the longest running esports circuit. We're in our 12th season. For them, starting 12 years ago, talking about a brand that has authenticity and credibility to the community, you probably can't get closer to Intel. They spend an enormous amount of time for the last 12 years, moving forward to every season, getting better and better at telling the story about how their silicon chips are the type of performance-enhancing tool that gamers should use. And they do a really good job at integrating their OEM partners at every event so that the people at the event, gamers, can test drive the latest technology, understand the latest technology. No different when Nadal comes out with a new tennis racket, of why that racket is a better performing piece of equipment than some other ones. Some quick numbers, because scale here was really important to them, being such a global company. We have 4 to 5 global events, and we picked those markets heavily on their key strategic business markets. 55 million unique viewers, 2 billion impressions, 150,000 live visitors, plus the Masters itself has $1 million prize pool. Again, hitting just one of the events so you can get an understanding of the scale. Sort of the Super Bowl of esports is, of all places, an Intel Extreme Masters event in Katowice, Poland. We get over 100,000, close to 120,000 visitors or fans for the time period. Last year it was 4 days. This year we're expanding it to 2 weekends. 86 million video plays over just a few days. Peak concurrence of 3.5 million peak concurrence. Hours watched just for this one event, 24 million. So pretty impressive, and this is the type of scale that I think is really open because of the global nature of esports for all your brands. Quickly, because I have 1 minute, but you guys had technical issues, so give me a couple more minutes. I'll be really quick. This video will probably roll, and then we'll have time for a couple questions. Totino's in Oakland. I'll talk over it a little bit. We wanted 10 million impressions for this one event. Got 20 million plus. Gave out 30,000 samples, and you'll see their activation was a bucking couch, which was a really interesting activation, and again, there it is, which created a huge amount of social media impressions and was very consistent with their brand. A little bit edgy, a little bit kooky. And it was a great activation for them.